Hello, today we're going to talk about how true forgiveness leads to true and deep healing of the effects from parental narcissistic abuse, complex PTSD, or relational traumas. I'm not going to be talking about the kind of forgiveness that we may learn and say in church, where it's a decision that we make. It's a process, and it's a healing process. I will be talking about the kind of forgiveness that's described in this book called um, the Book of Forgiving, the Fourfold Path of Healing Ourselves and Our World. It's by the authors Desmond Tutu and his daughter Mpho Tutu. I'll be discussing in this video chapter 1 entitled Why Forgive? What's the benefit of forgiving? How is it going to why choose this path in healing? My name is Anala Love. My channel builds community to support your recovery from parental narcissistic abuse and complex PTSD by telling the truth about parental abuse, its long-term effects, and share some tools that may help you in your recovery process, going from post-traumatic disorder to post-traumatic growth. In this book, the Book of Forgiving, it explores each aspect of what they call the fourfold path of forgiving. And there's 4 steps in this fourfold path. The first one is acknowledging the harm, acknowledging what happened, that you were harmed. The second is telling your story, and not just telling the story. It's a story of what happened to you, but also the truth of the pain of your story. Because sometimes we can tell our story, but we can be telling it like it just kind of numb out and tell our story. It's like as a matter of fact, but we need to tell our story, the truth of the pain of our story when we tell our story. And we need to say it to safe people that can validate us, to receive us. We see them receiving us and validating us, and they're safe. And we need to be able to tell our story as many times to as many safe people that can validate us as we need to. And after we're done with that, and it takes however long it takes, it's going to be different for each of us in different situations. However long that takes, that's what it's going to take. And after that, after we've done telling the truth of our story, truth of the pain of our story, once we got it out and we've seen the reflection of people validating that story, that's when we are ready to grant forgiveness. And so the forgiveness they're talking about in this book is an unconditional gift of grace that we give to ourselves to set ourselves free. But that only happens after the first 2 steps are done, and then we grant forgiveness. Now, the 4th step is renewing or releasing the relationship. After the injury is done, you can't go back to things as if they never happened. So you have a choice with the person to renew the relationship or release it. And those are the 4 steps in this fourfold process. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a video for each chapter of this book. There's 10 chapters, and we're going to go more into depth of these 4 steps. Forgiveness in this way, to me, is the secret to true deep healing when it comes to healing relational trauma. I've done a lot of therapy, support groups, self-care, self-education, prayer. I have a strong spiritual life, but nothing releases us, I believe, from the effects of repetitive trauma of abuse, especially if it comes from our parents or our loved ones or just any kind of trauma that can do damage. Nothing releases us from it like forgiveness in the form of that is unconditional, and it's an act of grace. And we have to be ready to be able to do that. We can decide that we want to do it, but we have to be ready to actually do the action of forgiving. It takes a process, a healing process. So it's a secret to me, true deep healing when it comes to healing from relational trauma. All that other therapy, even including prayer, is good, but nothing lets you go like true unconditional forgiveness, because it's a deep healing process, and it's given in grace. It's not something that we were taught when we were taught about forgiveness. We're not taught about how it's a process and it's painful and to face it. And then so the chapter Why We Forgive, it talks about, people cause pain when they're in pain. Hurt people, and it's true. I've hurt people, not intentionally. It didn't cross my mind. I couldn't wrap my brain around that this person that I cared enough about me that, my reaction to them was hurtful. And it didn't dawn on me until I went through my own healing process 30 years later and thinking about that specific incident that, like, you know what? I hurt this person a lot. I hurt this person, and it was so unintentional, but I was so in my own pain that I didn't realize that I mattered, and that's not an excuse, but it's just an example for me that hurt people do hurt people. However, we have a right to be outraged about what was done to us. At the same time, hurting the other person back rarely satisfies us. The only way to experience healing and peace after being hurt is to forgive, and that's just a fact of life. When we forgive, we take back control over our fate, over our feelings. We become our own liberators. And to me personally, I feel like that's my job. My job is to liberate myself, because nobody's going to come and liberate me. I've thought that, I can get liberated through, relationships and get the love that, I've been missing through romantic relationships. But really, it's my job. I think it's our job to find that the greatest love of all, like Whitney Houston says, the greatest love of all is in us. And it's our job to discover that. And it's our job to liberate us. So forgiveness gives us that liberation. It's something that we do for ourselves. And, to forgive releases ourselves from the trauma and hardship that we've experienced, and we get to reclaim our lives as our own. In chapter 1, there's a subtitle called The Freedom of Forgiveness. Forgiveness, it doesn't depend on the action of others. It doesn't depend on our parents or what they do or how they respond, or whoever hurt us. It doesn't depend on them. It is easier to forgive when the perpetrator expresses remorse. Then we could feel like we've been paid back in some way. In that understanding, forgiveness is something that we offer another person. Say, if you stop doing X, Y, Z, then I'll forgive you. And that's how we traditionally understand forgiveness. However, it's a gift that we can give, but it comes with strings attached. And, that person who harms us, gets to decide whether our requirements to get our forgiveness is too much for them or not. So we give that power to them. And if they find it is too hard to fulfill, or they fail us, again, we remain that person's victim. So if we choose to forgive unconditionally, offering that grace to the perpetrator, we're immediately untethered from the yoke that binds us to them. And so for me, it's the key to this is that it opens a door to a different future. It opens a door to a different future for us, one that's not bound by the logic of our past, like all the harm and the trauma that's done to us that affects us, that manifests itself in complex PTSD, and it affects every aspect of our lives. Unconditional forgiveness, that grace, it opens the door for a different future for us, one that is not bound by the logic of our future, that all the stuff that we've been through. Logically, we should be damaged. I believe I shouldn't even be here. It's kind of a miracle that I'm still alive. So, forgiveness gives us that healing that defies the logic of our painful past. Forgiveness is not a luxury. The healing and reconciliation that's described in the book is not a magic spell. It doesn't draw a veil over the hurt. It's it's an honest reckoning. It demands an honest reckoning, and that's where the pain comes in. It's behavior that's hurtful, that's shameful, that's demeaning, and that's abusive. Those things must be brought into the fierce light of truth. And a lot of times we don't want to do that, especially if we're a scapegoat. We're used to being blamed for things that we didn't even do, and we just want peace. But however, for this type of forgiveness to be the healing, the deep healing that it can be and set us free, we've got to bring the pain of the abuse and all those things to the fierce light of truth in this forgiveness process. And the truth is brutal. It's brutal, and it may exacerbate the hurt. In fact, in my case, it does. Just going through my life and just like, okay, it's time for me to forgive, it's extremely painful. I have to go through a lot of anger, a lot of time being angry, and just it's gut wrenching. But it just, there's suffering while you're going through the abuse, and then say if you decide to go, no contact, that's painful. Well, after you go no contact, there's a healing process that for me, there was a pain involved that I've never experienced before. However, it was a healing pain. I kept getting stronger and stronger every day. So now I'm at the door of, okay, I think I'm ready to forgive. And you really got to get honest about what happened. I got to get honest about what happened to me and how I felt, and get honest about how I participated in it and things like that. You just got to be, and it's hard, but it's worth it. So, and it may make things worse depending on the situation. But if we want true forgiveness, we want real forgiveness and real healing, we must face the real injury. We must face the real injury. And it's hard, but it's worth it. It's worth it. We're worth it. So the invitation to forgive. The invitation to forgive is not an invitation to forget. It's not an invitation to claim that the injury is less hurtful than it really is. It's not a request to paper over a fissure in the relationship, acting like it's okay when it's not. It's an invitation to healing, and it's an invitation to peace, and that's what that is. Even if the person that hurt you doesn't participate in the forgiveness process, say they're not remorseful, we can still walk the path of forgiveness, because that's the only way that we can heal the pain from our hearts, is to walk that path. Even if it's by ourselves, it frees us. And then our memory of this person or the people who hurt us will no longer exert the kind of control they've had over our moods, our disposition, once we forgive. And that's going to take a process and not just a decision. Sometimes maybe I've heard of people just waking up and all of a sudden they've forgiven, but it hasn't happened like that for me yet. So, so we want to get to a place where what they did to us no longer defines us. And so I'm going to be creating more videos. The chapters in the book is going to describe each of those four steps of forgiveness more in detail. And so each video will cover a chapter. The next video I'm going to do is on the chapter entitled What Forgiveness Is Not. I put a link in the description in case you want to buy the book and read it for yourself. There's also the audiobook version of this book, which sometimes to me is easier to read it through an audiobook if it's a tough book for me to get through. So there's that option as well. If I missed anything about forgiveness that you would like to add, please add it in the comments. If you've read this book or are reading this book and you want to start a conversation about it, please start it in the comments. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and click the notification button to let you know when I upload the next video. If you think this video will be helpful to someone else, please share it. Thank you for watching.